Hi, I'm Brad Page, the President and CEO of Kennebunk Savings. We are so excited to be celebrating the town of Kennebunk's 200th anniversary. 2 entire centuries of a strong and spirited community is something we should all be incredibly proud of. This year is also Kennebunk Savings' 150th anniversary, and we remain the same mutually owned community savings bank that we were back in 1871. Our past is deeply intertwined with this great community. And as we both celebrate, we look forward to a future of continuing our long-standing support of the town and its residents. We hope you enjoy this presentation.
Good morning. I am Lori Parkinson, and I'll be moderating this discussion on the Bicentennial quilt. Please feel free to leave when you're finished or stay and enjoy the rest of the show, because the last time we were all together was November 2019. First, I'd like to introduce Kathy Ostrander Roberts, who's the chairman of the Bicentennial Committee, and she will share a few words about what the committee's been up to and her beautiful square.
Hi there, I am Kathy Ostrander Roberts. I, as Lori said, am the chairman of the Bicentennial Committee. We started out with several what we call legacy projects. Among them was a scholarship to a high school senior. Another was a commemorative booklet that hopefully we'll be putting out this year. And we had planned a community-wide celebration in downtown Kennebunk, which due to COVID didn't happen. And a fourth was we have been doing an ongoing archaeological dig at what is known as the previously enslaved persons of color community site. That's a mouthful. And that is ongoing. And the fifth one, and the one we're here today about, is our commemorative quilt. I am not a quilter. And I gave the task, or we voted Lori to be our chairperson for that subcommittee, and she has taken it on and done such a fantastic job that we couldn't have asked for a better person in charge. So, mind you, not a quilter, but this is the quilt piece I did, and it is to it's supposed to commemorate the freed African Americans, or I guess the better term is the previously enslaved persons of color who resided in Kennebunk. There were what we're finding to be upwards of 20 people, and this topic has not been widely discussed in the last 200 years. So in this way, I hope to bring it to light and keep it in the public view for 200 more years. That's it.
Thank you, Kathy. Next, I'd like to introduce Cynthia Walker, who's the director of the Brickstore Museum. And I hope she can say a few words about the collaboration between the Brickstore and the Bicentennial Committee and share with us what she chose to do for her square. So, Cynthia.
Hi, my name's Cynthia Walker. As Laurie said, I'm the director here at the Brickstore Museum, which is the local history museum of our region. We're always happy to work with anyone who's interested in expanding the role of history in our community. So the Bicentennial Committee, of course, was the perfect way to do that. I am not a quilter either, just like Kathy. But I created the square that I did to represent the women of Kennebunk, whose contributions were often undervalued by traditional histories. The pieces of fabric on the square came from the museum's collection of historic dress materials, which means the diverse patterns and colors you see that are all sewn together actually belonged to local women.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And then I'm going to ask Merton Brown, who is also on our committee. And he's one of the 2 men that we had join us, and he did a fabulous job. So Merton, I'm going to pass it to you so you can describe why you chose the square you did.
Yes, good morning. I'm Merton Brown. I'm the town clerk of Kennebunk, and I thought it would be important for the town clerk of Kennebunk to have a square on the quilt. I don't sew, and even after doing this, I still don't. So but I put my best foot forward. I am a collector and a seller of 1930s, 40s, and 50s cotton kitchen tablecloths. So one of them had some damage on it, so I cut out this square and quilted around the lobster claw, the clams, and the seaweed. So I'm very happy to have the town clerk's office represented in the bicentennial quilt. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Merton. Now we'll just go on down the list. Joan Emerson, who's been a wonderful support to me. Joan?
Good morning. My name is Joan Emerson, and although I don't live in Kennebunk, I have many friends who do, and I am there often. I wanted to be part of this group because I believe in the historical value of making this quilt. There's a previously made quilt in one of your museums that was made by several friends of mine, some of whom are now no longer with us. And I just feel that this was an important part of the bicentennial process. I made a trolley on one of my blocks. I did a lobster shack on another, and we needed one more lobster to make 4 for our corners. So I did also a lobster.
Great, thank you very much. And I also wanted to say that Joan did a fabulous job of binding all of our blocks. So they're all consistent and they're all gorgeous. So I thank you for that. All right, Delta.
My name is Delta Fuller. And we have come to Kennebunk as summer residents since 1960. And my husband retired here 31 years ago. And so we've been living here permanently. I chose to represent the Seacoast Garden Club because the garden club has such a presence in the town. And I thought that there should be a quilt square representing that. The garden club maintains 7 gardens throughout Kennebunk and Kennebunkport. The community house garden, the fairy garden at the library, the Graves Memorial Garden, the Kennebunk Town Hall Garden, the Kennebunkport Post Office, the Monument Garden, and the Oak Necks Garden, which is down by the beach. So what I did was the beach rose, which is the logo for the Seacoast Garden Club.
Wonderful, thank you, Delta.
Okay.
Pam Eagleson.
I am Pam Eagleson, and I have lived in Kennebunk for some 53 years. And for this bicentennial quilt, I chose to commemorate Hope Cemetery, one of the most visible reminders of Kennebunk's rich history. Within the 25-acre cemetery is found the history of Kennebunk, as told through the lives of the people who lived it. Depicted in this quilt block is a tombstone topped by the virtue of hope. Hope is one of 3 theological virtues. She's usually seen with an anchor, most appropriate for a community so tied to the sea.
Wonderful, thank you, Pam. Cindy Sayers, you are next.
My name is Cindy Sayers, and this is my quilt block. My block is the gazebo at Rotary Park. Starting in 1953, the Kennebunk Rotary Club worked with the town to turn 2 vacant buildings into a 1-acre park. Rotary Park was established in 1980. Through the years, the gazebo benches were added to the Rotary Park, and the most recent addition to Rotary Park was the brick walkway leading to the gazebo. I moved to 34 Fletcher Street in Kennebunk, Maine permanently in 2016, so I'm pretty new. I'm a maker, creating various art media, including beading and needle felting, both of which you'll find on my quilt block. I've never made a quilt block before, but I was willing to try because I wanted to be part of the Kennebunk Bicentennial, celebrating my new community. My block incorporates needle felting on hand-dyed wool and beading. The dog, made of wool, shot with gold threads, was my golden retriever, Baron von Fezziwig. We called him Fezzy. Unfortunately, he passed away during the construction of this block. Fezzy loved parks, which is why he's pictured in my square.
Thank you, Cindy. Shirley Bradbury. Oh, hi, Shirley. There you are. Hi, Shirley.
Okay, I grew up in Hollowell, and in 1974, when I married my husband, Tom, we lived in Cape Porpoise, and we built a house in Kennebunk Port and lived there for 31 years, and now we're back in Cape Porpoise. In 1976, I did a block of Cape Island for the Bicentennial quilt that I think resides at the brick store now. So when this opportunity came along, it seemed kind of a natural bookend to that project. And there, I reviewed the list of blocks suggested to represent the Kennebunks. Looked a little bit daunting. So I started with the blueberry block because I'd done blueberries before. That was easy. And then I chose the shrine at the Franciscan Monastery, Our Lady of Lourdes, because that's one of the first places my husband took me when we were dating. It remains a very lovely, peaceful, beautiful spot, and that seemed like a natural. So I thought I was done. And then when Laurie put out a call for some people to maybe do a third block, I stepped out of my comfort zone and did a picture of Ed Muskie, Senator Edmund Muskie. I figured I might have a better shot of coming up with a likeness since he was so unique and distinct looking. And I had met him and his wife Jane shopped at our store when we owned Bradbury's, so it seemed like a good fit. And it was a challenge. I was pretty satisfied with the results. Sorry, I don't have a picture of it today, but should be able to recognize it. It was an honor to work on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Next, we have Patty Middleman.
My name is Patty Millman. I have been a visitor to your lovely town of Kennebunk for years, going to quilt retreats at the Franciscan House. And in honor of my home, someday, please God, maybe I will be fortunate to live in your beautiful town. I made a lobster block because Shirley, Cape Porpoise, and that's where it's part of my ritual to always go and have a lobster roll right there. And this past September, I celebrated my 25th wedding anniversary, and I was fortunate to bring my husband to share in the glory and beauty of your lovely little town. And he understood why it is so special to me. I feel very honored to be a part of this project. Lori did an amazing job of getting us all together. And thank you so much for including me and participating in this historic event.
Thank you, Patty. We really enjoyed having you. Thanks. So next is Kathy Boyce.
Hi, I'm Kathy Boyce. I've lived in Kennebunk for 30 years. My husband and I moved up here back in the 90s, and we have loved it since we've been here. I've been a quilter since 1998. I made a t-shirt quilt for my nephew, and I just got hooked from there. So I've made plenty of quilts between now and then. So what I made was, first one I made, I thread painted the wedding cake house. And because I just think that was one of the first things the realtor showed us when we came up here to look at real estate. And I was just it just was beautiful. I just loved it. And so I did that, and I wanted it to be part of the history because it may not be here forever. So that way it's etched in our memory somewhere. And the other block I did was Webb Hannock Golf Course. And the reason I did that was because I'm a golfer and I just love Ken Janes had taken a picture of the clubhouse and I just loved it. And I thought when they needed another quilt block, it was something that was dear and near to me. And so I decided to do, take that picture that Ken Janes had done, which he gave me permission to do, and thread paint that. So those were my 2 blocks.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
Yes.
And now Leslie Lingard.
Okay, good morning. I've lived in Kennebunk for 40 years now. I've been a quilter for almost all of that time. My husband and I have raised 2 children here. I'm currently the director of the Kennebunk Community Garden, which has been in existence since 2009. And I felt it was an important part. It has become a very important part of our community. And so the colors that I used and the vegetable fabric that I used are things that we grow in the garden. I also happen to live right near Hope Woods. It's right around the corner from me. And I frequently go up into Hope Woods and walk through the paths. And it's a huge treasure for me. And that's something that I wanted to share. So I love that there's cemetery and the Hope Woods are represented. And I really particularly love walking in the woods in the wintertime.
Hi, my name is Kathy Graham, and I have lived in Maine for the last 20 years. I am a quilter and certainly a lover of Maine. So I just thought making my square of the lobster was a perfect fit. And I was so glad to be asked. Thank you.
My name is Beth Sandmeyer. I live in Kennebunk, and I'm currently the chair of the Kennebunk Land Trust. And I was happy to participate in the Bicentennial Quilt to represent the Land Trust. It's my hope that in another 200 years, Kennebunk will look much the same with lots of protected land and open space for all to enjoy.
Hi there, my name is Laura Snyder Smith and I live in Kennebunk with my family. This is my square for the Kennebunk Bicentennial Quilt, and it's inspired by the beach, of course. The beach is my happy spot, and the breakwater is a local landmark that everybody knows. I love to walk there on a summer day so I can watch the parade of boats go in and out of the port, and I'm often recommending it to guests in my job at the Chamber of Commerce. So my square is also a nod to our maritime history and tourism that helped build our town. And the whale tail, well, that details for my daughter who works on the Whale Watch and wanted it noted.
So I would like to introduce Brenda Freeman Kusic. Kick. Oh, I've never actually said it out loud. So anyway, and she did a wonderful square about Cousin School. So I will pass it over to Brenda and she can tell us what went into it.
I chose Cousin School for my square to celebrate neighborhood and friendship. In the 1940s, if you lived west of the Mousam River, you went to Cousin School from kindergarten to 6th grade. We walked to school from Brown, Friend, Swan, Hovey, Day, Hall, York, High, and Pleasant Streets. The bus brought students from McGuire, Whitten, and Cat Mousam Road. We were safe and looked out for each other. After school, we played in the woods around the standpipe and along the river. We met in the fields for pickup baseball games. We went to the river to swim and canoe. In winter, we built snow forts and had snowball fights. We skated on frozen ponds and found hills for sledding. Some of us tried skiing. The 6 years following World War II were growth years in our town and country. New ideas ended neighborhood schools. Busing took us to schools organized by grade levels. We were sent to Park Street School, followed by Kennebunk High School. Our friendships and memories remain strong. Today, there are no public schools west of the Milsom. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joan Cole. My block is Sea and Sand. Very simple, but living in the ocean, so I had to do something that represented that. So I've been a quilter for over 20 years. I enjoy this project. I'm looking forward to seeing the quilt complete. Thank you.
Well, let me just put up it's the Maine flag. And basically many people have probably already seen this in the last couple years because it's been very popular for sea bags to put up this logo. The quilt square that I did was appliqued and embroidered. And basically when Maine became the state in 1820, the official flag was a military regimental flag. And that flag had the state arms, which basically was a star, a recumbent moose, and on the bottom, there was an insignia of individual military regiments. And there were probably about 40 regiments in Maine in 1820. In 1901, there was an act to establish a state flag. And that's when this 1901 flag came into being. And it had the North Star for following to lead, and the pine tree, which in New England is a symbol of freedom. The flag was one of those visual images that could be easily identified as being from the state of Maine. And it was much like a mariner flag, which you can tell if someone's in panic or distress. Unfortunately, that flag in 1901 was only used until 1909. And that's when the current flag that we have now with the insignia again was put into being. And I just thought that, you know, being on the Maine coast and being a sailor along with my husband, that the mariner flag just kind of spoke to us, that I wanted to have that as my quilt, as one of my quilt squares, because it's kind of intrinsic to every community on the Maine coast. So that's flag number one, quilt square number one. Okay. The second one that I did, it's called a Piece of History, and it's an embroidered and appliqued, I don't know if you can, there, square. And basically what I did was go to the Brickstore Museum. And as you come up the stairs, there's a portion of a stenciled wall that was painted by an itinerant painter back in 1820, 1840, and his name was Moses Eaton Jr. And that I'm sure most of you have seen if you've been to the museum. That's right at the top of the stairs, as I said. And that wall itself is from the Thomas House in the Alewife section of Kennebunk. And the house itself was built in 1750. But Moses Eaton Jr. had created the painting stencil wall in 1820. And I chose that basically because I love trying to bring history into the current world as it is, and it was a challenge that really intrigued me to bring something from the past and weave it into our current sensibilities. And I think history itself is weaved into the past, present, and future. So it just, again, it was one of those things that was a challenge, and I wanted to have it part of the Bicentennial. So that's my story.
Great. Thank you very much, Mary Frances.
Oh, you're welcome.
Next, we have Amy Slater, who I met years and years ago as a knitter, and then come to find out she's also a quilter. So I'd like to introduce Amy, and she will speak about her 2 squares that she did.
I did Wallingford Farm. I don't have pictures or the squares with me right now. I did Wallingford Farm. I've always thought it was one of the really beautiful old buildings of Kennebunk. I love it in the summer with all the flowers out front. I also have a personal connection to it in that my older daughter worked at the farm store through middle school and high school. So it was kind of fun to revisit. I also did a crazy quilt square. I've always loved crazy quilts. I love the deep, rich jewel tone colors, and I love the embroidery. And I tend to be kind of a precise, very everything just so kind of person. So it was a challenge for me to do a crazy quilt and kind of step out of my box and do something a little wild. And I really had fun with it. It was a great joy to kind of let go.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy.
Welcome.
Next, we have Karen Plattis, who also did 2 beautiful blocks. And Karen will now describe them.
So I did 2 blocks and I have them here. I went down and got them. The first one is the Kennebunk Library, which I think is just a great, it's such a beautiful building. I just love it. And I love the library, and I've been on the library board and I participate in a number of their programs every year. So I like to support the library, make sure that it gets out there. But the building itself is so pretty, and I just thought that would be it's such a dominant spot in town also, that I thought it had to be in this quilt. The second one that I did is taken from the Brickstore Museum. It's and both of my quilt squares are applique and embroidery, and those I when we had the chance to do a second one, I thought, oh, what do I want to do? And I've always liked sailing ships, so I always thought that would be great. The whole idea of this quilt I thought was a really terrific one. I've been wanting to do pictorial quilting for a long time, since the 70s, when I saw a pictorial quilt that had been done as a fundraiser for programs on the west coast of the town that I lived in there. And I always thought that was such a great fundraiser for the Brickstore Library. So I always thought I was going to suggest that we do this, like when I moved here 12 years ago, but of course I never did. So I was so glad when Lori suggested that we do this. Anyway, the other reason that I loved this fabric, and I thought I have to use that for water somewhere. And so what better way to do that than put a ship on it? And it's a ship that it came from a picture from the brick store, a painting from the brick store. So it's a ship that was built here in town.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, Karen. Next, we have Steve Horocek, who is also on the Bicentennial Committee with me, and one of the 2 men who participated in the project. And I'm extremely proud of both of them, and especially Steve, because he worked so hard on his square, and he attended a applique workshop with me at Camp Wool to kind of perfect his skill. So anyway, it's a wonderful piece that he did. So Steve, how about you tell us about your square?
Greetings all. This is Steve Horocek calling, and I'm it shouldn't be this hard, just talk. Greetings all. My name is Steve Horocek, and my choice for the quilt was the Lafayette elm, which has a great deal of history in Kennebunk, and based on Lafayette, who has a great deal of history in the country. He as a young man, he became involved with the revolution. From France, he came and joined Washington as an aide during the revolution. And he was even active in the surrender at Yorktown. So he was quite a significant figure in the revolution and in our history. And in 1824, when President Monroe invited him to tour the country, he visited all 24 states that were part of the country at the time. And in 1825, he visited Maine and addressed the people of Kennebunk under the Lafayette elm, which was located at Lafayette Park, which is now Lafayette Park. The tree no longer exists because it became part of the diseases that killed many of the trees in the country. But there's another tree now replacing it. But the tree became an emblem that is part of the town seal. And I thought this was a great addition. And so it all came together for me to do the Lafayette elm. I'd never quilted before. I'd done some sewing, I hemmed pants and things like that. But quilting was new to me, and I thank Lori for all her guidance and suggestions on how to proceed. I had a great deal of fun doing it, and I was very pleased with the way it came out. I hope it becomes an addition to the quilt, the complete quilted pattern. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Lori Parkinson, and I am part of the Bicentennial Committee. And early on, we decided what projects we wanted to do related to the Kennebunk's Bicentennial, and the topic of a quilt came up. It was voted on and decided that we should have a quilt, but nobody raised their hand to organize it. So having quilted previously when I was a newlywed in 1984, I raised my hand and said, sure, I'll take this project on. So bear in mind, I hadn't quilted since I was, a young woman, and here I was in charge of the Bicentennial quilt. But it has been the most amazing experience for me. I have discovered a love of wool applique, which I didn't know anything about until I started this. I've met some wonderful people. It's been really an incredible experience. So we decided that we would do a potholder quilt, which is a style that was popular during the Civil War. And it basically is a square that's finished front and back, can be done at your home, and then they're all stitched together to make a quilt. And for our group, this seemed to make the most sense, as opposed to getting a flat piece of fabric and then quilting, is a quilting bee kind of thing. So anyway, we, along with Mary Frances Smith, who became my quilting buddy and great source of advice and just great ideas. So we launched this program. She's not on the committee with me, but she's been my right-hand woman throughout the whole process. And we decided that we wanted to do this potholder quilt, and we wanted to make it a pictorial quilt, and we wanted to have images that reflected Kennebunk from 1820 to 2020. So we sat down and made a list of people, places, and things that we thought represented Kennebunk to us, and put together an application and got the applications out. And we figured we needed 45 blocks minimum to start this project. And we got about half filled. And then I was feeling extremely discouraged. And I thought, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. You can't force people to do something they don't want to do. So we put out an appeal. I mentioned this to the committee, and I had, 3 members from my committee who had never quilted, sewn, or done anything like that sign up. So with that bit of good fortune, we were off and running, and then everyone chimed in, and some people did 2 quilts, 2 squares, and some did 3. And anyway, we ended up with more than we needed, and we have enlarged the quilt. And so it was a stone soup. I mean, everybody pitched in at the end. So that was very gratifying. So Another interesting thing that happened is people started digressing from the list that we had provided. And I very soon realized that this was going to be an equivalent of a crazy quilt mixed in with a potholder quilt, because people went off on different tangents and things that meant things to them. And it was so wonderful to see the creativity and the thought process that went into it. So we opened the floodgates and all sorts of wonderful ideas came flooding in. Then we were on the verge of, we had a workshop in November 2019 on how to construct a crazy quilt. I mean, luckily in Maine, there's a woman, Wendy Reed, who is the #2 authority on potholder quilts in the country. She lives in Maine. And she came down and did a workshop for us. And so we were all set, we were ready to go. We were going to finish our squares and get going. And then COVID came onto the scene. So it all came screeching to a halt. And now we're at a point where we've made the decision that we will present this quilt in a different format than we had originally anticipated. It's going to be on YouTube. And we've had quilters speaking about their pieces, and so that will be available. We will ultimately get the quilt stitched together when the time is right and safe for all of us who wish to stitch together can come together. So anyway, that's a brief history of the Bicentennial quilt, and I will share what I have done. The first I did, this was a square of Edith Barry. Edith Cleves Barry was the founder of the Brickstore Museum, and I've always been intrigued by her art and her presence and the Brickstore Museum in general. So that was a kind of a natural selection for me. And she's done in wool applique, something which I had never done before. And it took me a long time, but I really enjoyed every bit of it. So then I moved on to the next one, which is going to be the centerpiece for the quilt. And I'll hold this up, although there will be a block showing it, a photograph of it. And this takes up 6 squares. And I was trying to come up with an idea that would be not too complicated, so it wouldn't detract from the other squares, and yet would be bold enough to, and simple enough to show the Bicentennial. So I came across this kit and I adapted it. And I put in, obviously, Kennebunk 1820, 2020. One thing that happened during the, when I was stitching this is Steve Spofford, who was our town historian and also on the Bicentennial Committee, passed away. And so I added this B, and the initial S is stitched into the line behind the B. So that's a little nod to Steve and all the hard work that he did. And he was busy as a bee. He certainly was, you know, involved in so many wonderful things. So he's missed. And then at the very end, we were down 1 square. And I thought, well, what am I going to do this last square? And I thought I had to do something that related to COVID, because COVID had completely changed our lives. So I'm not finished with this. I came up with this COVID square. And I can also show you how this also is wool applique with French knots. And I had never known how to do a French knot. And I thought, well, this is the time to learn, because they're just perfect for this. So you can see what it looks like on the back. Then, just as far as how the quilt is constructed, every quilter got a kit that had the back material and the wool liner that is then stitched together, quilted together, and then it's bound. I would like to say one thing about the backing of the quilt. Mary Frances, this is a project that we worked on together. I don't know if you can see it, but we designed our own fabric based on a piece that came from a crazy quilt that the Brickstore Museum owned. And we took the concept to Heather Dutton, who's a fabric designer here in Kennebunk. So she picked the element that she thought would work the best and recreated it in a digital format so that we could have it printed. And we chose our colors to be, it's a light linen color with a little bit of blue in it. So from a distance, it reads as a solid, but up close, it is actually a historic pattern, which I think is a very interesting little tidbit. So anyway, I'd like to say cheers, bicentennial cheers to all of my quilters. You've been fabulous, all of you, and it's been just a wonderful experience, and we look forward to sharing it with you. Thank you.